The harsh winter wind whistled through the dense pine forest of Montana as Marcus Stone trudged through knee-deep snow. At 65 years old, his weathered face told stories of countless days spent in these mountains. But today felt different. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pristine white landscape, and an unusual silence hung in the air, the kind of silence that made even experienced woodsmen like Marcus uneasy. 25 years ago, on this very mountain, Marcus had made the hardest decision of his life. He had raised Thunder, an orphaned grizzly cub, after finding him next to his mother's body. For 3 years, Thunder had been more than just a bear. He had been family. Marcus could still remember those gentle brown eyes that seemed to understand every word he said, and the playful way Thunder would splash in the creek behind his cabin. But as Thunder grew larger and stronger, Marcus knew he had to let him return to the wild. It was the right thing to do, though it broke his heart to watch Thunder disappear into these same woods. Now, as Marcus checked his trail cameras as part of his work as a wildlife researcher, his thoughts kept drifting back to Thunder. He never saw the bear again after releasing him, but sometimes he wondered if Thunder still roamed these mountains. The wind picked up, carrying with it an odd scent that made Marcus pause. His decades of experience told him something wasn't right. The birds had stopped singing, and the usual rustling of small animals had gone quiet. Marcus pulled his thick jacket tighter and gripped his walking stick harder. His arthritis was acting up in the cold, making each step more difficult than the last. As he rounded a large boulder, he froze. Fresh bear tracks crossed his path. Not just one set, but several. In all his years in these mountains, he had never seen so many bears moving together. His heart began to race as he realized he had walked into something he didn't understand. Something that defied everything he knew about these solitary creatures. The light was fading fast, and Marcus knew he should turn back. But before he could move, a deep growl echoed through the trees behind him. He turned slowly, his breath visible in the cold air, and found himself facing 3 massive grizzly bears. Their eyes gleamed with an unsettling intelligence, and Marcus realized with growing dread that this was no random encounter. These bears were hunting together, and he was their prey. Marcus's mind raced through his options. His truck was 2 miles back, and his old legs wouldn't outrun these bears. The closest tree was too far to reach safely. He gripped his walking stick tighter, knowing it would do little against 3 full-grown grizzlies. The bears spread out, moving with an unnatural coordination that sent chills down his spine. The largest bear, standing nearly 9 feet tall, took a step forward and released a thunderous roar that shook the snow from nearby branches. In that moment, Marcus thought of Sarah, his late wife, who had helped him raise Thunder all those years ago. She had always said Thunder was special, different from other bears. The way he would wait patiently while she tended her garden, how he seemed to smile when they spoke to him. Animals remember kindness, she would say. They carry it in their hearts, just like we do. Marcus had dismissed it as her romantic way of seeing the world, but now, facing death in the fading light, he wished she was right. The bears moved closer, their breath visible in the cold air. Marcus backed away slowly, his boots crunching in the snow. His heels struck something solid, the boulder. He was trapped. The bears were only 20 feet away now, their muscles rippling under thick winter fur. Marcus could see their ribs showing slightly. They were hungry, desperate. He understood now. The harsh winter had driven them to hunt together, breaking their solitary nature out of necessity. Just as the largest bear tensed to charge, another roar split the air, deeper, more powerful than the others. The 3 bears turned their heads toward the sound, and Marcus felt the ground trembling beneath his feet. Through the gathering darkness, a massive shape burst from the trees to his right. It was another grizzly, larger than any Marcus had ever seen. The newcomer's fur was grayed with age, but its movements were powerful and purposeful as it positioned itself between Marcus and the other bears. Marcus's heart nearly stopped. On the bear's left ear, barely visible in the dim light, was a notch, a distinctive mark left by an old injury. He would never forget that mark. During Thunder's last summer with him, the young bear had caught his ear on a piece of barbed wire while helping Marcus repair the fence around Sarah's garden. It had healed quickly, leaving that unique notch that Sarah said made him look distinguished. Time seemed to slow as Marcus stared at the massive bear before him. Despite the years, despite the gray fur, he knew those eyes. They held the same gentle intelligence he remembered, now paired with a wild wisdom earned through decades in these mountains. Thunder had grown enormous, his muscles hardened by years of survival, but there was no mistaking who he was. Marcus felt tears freezing on his cheeks as memories flooded back. Thunder splashing in the creek, helping Sarah pull carrots from her garden, sleeping under the stars on warm summer nights. The three hungry bears hesitated, clearly intimidated by Thunder's size and strength. The largest of them made a low warning sound, but Thunder responded with a roar that seemed to shake the entire mountainside. Marcus watched in amazement as Thunder stood to his full height, towering over the other bears. He moved with the confidence of an alpha predator, someone who had ruled these mountains for years. The three bears began to back away slowly, but the largest one suddenly lunged forward, perhaps driven by desperation. Thunder's reaction was instantaneous. He surged forward with surprising speed for his size, catching the attacking bear with a powerful sweep of his paw. The impact sent the smaller bear tumbling into the snow. The other two bears retreated immediately, and after a moment, their wounded companion scrambled to its feet and followed. As the sound of the retreating bears faded into the darkness, Thunder remained standing between Marcus and the direction they had fled. Snow was falling now, thick flakes catching in Thunder's fur. Marcus hardly dared to breathe. After all these years, after releasing Thunder back to the wild, here they were again. Sarah had been right. Animals do remember kindness. Thunder had not only remembered him, but had chosen to protect him, despite living as a wild bear for 25 years. Slowly, carefully, Thunder turned to face Marcus. The old bear's breath came out in great clouds of steam in the cold air. Marcus remained still, his back against the boulder, as Thunder took one step toward him, then another. The bear moved with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a creature of his size. When he was just a few feet away, Thunder lowered his massive head and made a soft sound. The same gentle rumble he used to make when Marcus would read the newspaper on the porch, with Thunder lying at his feet. "You remember that sound, don't you, old friend?" Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah used to say it was your way of purring." At the mention of Sarah's name, Thunder's ears twitched forward. Marcus felt his heart constrict. Even her name had meaning to this remarkable creature. With trembling fingers, Marcus slowly reached out his hand. Thunder moved forward, pressing his graying muzzle against Marcus's palm. The fur was coarse and thick, nothing like the soft coat of the young bear Marcus had raised, but the gentle way Thunder leaned into his touch was exactly the same. The moment was interrupted by a distant howl. Wolves, maybe a mile away. Thunder's head snapped up, his wild instincts instantly alert. But instead of running, he looked back at Marcus with what could only be described as concern. The old man was still a mile from his truck, and darkness had fully settled over the mountain. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and more snow was beginning to fall. Marcus knew these conditions could turn deadly for someone his age, especially with hungry predators around. Thunder seemed to understand the danger too. He moved closer to Marcus, and then did something that took Marcus's breath away. He lowered himself to the ground, just as he used to do when he was young and wanted Marcus to climb onto his back to play. But this wasn't play. Thunder's message was clear. He was offering to help Marcus get off the mountain safely. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. Even after their emotional reunion, Thunder was still a wild grizzly bear, and climbing onto his back went against everything Marcus knew about wildlife safety. But another howl, closer now, made his decision for him. His arthritic knees were already stiff from the cold, and the falling snow was quickly covering his tracks. With careful movements, Marcus gripped Thunder's thick fur and pulled himself onto the bear's broad back. The familiar feeling brought back a flash of memory. A warm summer afternoon, when a younger Thunder had carried him across the creek to help Sarah harvest wild berries on the other bank. Thunder rose slowly, adjusting his balance to accommodate Marcus's weight. The bear's fur was so thick that Marcus could feel the warmth radiating through his cold, numbed legs. Thunder began moving through the darkness with remarkable sure-footedness, choosing a path that seemed to avoid the deepest snow. His powerful muscles rolled beneath Marcus as he navigated the difficult terrain, and Marcus marveled at how the once playful cub had grown into this magnificent creature. The wolves' howls grew closer, and Thunder's pace quickened. Marcus could see their eyes now, green gold dots in the darkness, moving parallel to their path. There were at least 6 of them, hungry enough to consider attacking even a full-grown grizzly. Thunder released a warning growl that vibrated through his entire body, but the wolves kept pace. They were trying to wear Thunder down, waiting for him to tire while protecting his unusual passenger. Snow was falling heavily now, and the wind cut through Marcus's layers like ice. He leaned forward, pressing closer to Thunder's warmth, his thoughts drifting to Sarah again. She had always insisted that Thunder would remember them, that the bond they shared was special. "Love doesn't follow the rules we think it should," she had told Marcus on her last day in the hospital. "It finds its own way, just like Thunder did in the wild." At the time, Marcus had thought she was just trying to comfort him about both losses, Thunder's departure and her own impending one. A wolf darted forward through the snow, snapping at Thunder's hind leg. The massive bear spun with surprising agility, keeping Marcus safely on his back while striking out at the attacker. His powerful paw caught the wolf's shoulder, sending it yelping back into the darkness. But the brief stop had cost them. The other wolves were closing in, their hungry eyes gleaming in the moonlight that filtered through the falling snow. Thunder made a decision then, veering sharply away from the path Marcus recognized as leading to his truck. Marcus trusted his old friend's instincts, gripping the thick fur tighter as Thunder increased his speed. The wolves followed, but something in their pursuit had changed. They seemed less confident now, more hesitant. Marcus understood why when he heard the sound of rushing water ahead. Thunder was heading for the river. The roar of the partially frozen river grew louder, and Marcus's heart raced as he remembered something from his decades of studying these mountains. The Phillips family cave was near here, a deep cavern where old Jim Phillips used to keep his hunting supplies. If that's where Thunder was heading, he was proving more intelligent than Marcus had ever imagined. The cave would provide shelter from both the storm and the wolves. Thunder approached the river's edge, where ice had formed thick sheets along the banks. The wolves held back, unwilling to follow onto the treacherous surface. With careful, deliberate steps, Thunder began crossing on the ice, each footfall tested before he committed his full weight. Marcus could feel the bear's muscles trembling with the effort of moving so cautiously while still carrying him. The ice creaked beneath them, and Marcus held his breath as they inched forward. He could see the cave's entrance on the other bank, partially hidden behind a curtain of icicles that glowed faintly in the moonlight. They were halfway across when Marcus heard it, a deep, splintering crack that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Thunder froze, his muscles coiled with tension. In the sudden stillness, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The wolves weren't just staying back because of the ice, they were watching something upstream. Through the thickening snow, Marcus could see dark shapes tumbling in the current, a mass of broken ice and debris rushing toward them. Thunder seemed to realize their danger at the same moment. He lunged forward, but the sudden movement caused the ice beneath them to fracture. Marcus felt Thunder's body shift, adjusting to keep him above the surface as the ice began breaking apart. The bear's claws scraped desperately against the slick surface, searching for purchase. In that moment, Marcus was transported back 25 years to the day he had to let Thunder go. The bear had looked back at him with such trust, such confusion. Marcus had told himself he was doing the right thing, but he had always wondered if he had betrayed that trust. Now, as the ice cracked around them, Marcus made a split-second decision. He rolled off Thunder's back, hitting the ice hard. "Go!" he shouted, knowing Thunder's chances were better without his weight. But Thunder didn't move. Instead, the massive bear turned back, fighting against the breaking ice to reach Marcus. The older man's heart swelled with a mixture of love and terror. Thunder was choosing him over his own safety, just as Marcus had once chosen Thunder's freedom over their bond. The rushing water was deafening now, the ice breaking up faster. Thunder reached Marcus and did something extraordinary. He dropped onto his stomach, spreading his weight across the ice, and used his enormous paw to pull Marcus closer. The move reminded Marcus so powerfully of their practice sessions in the creek years ago, when Thunder would help Sarah teach neighborhood kids about water safety, that tears froze on his cheeks. Just then, The ice shelf they were on broke free completely. Thunder wrapped his body around Marcus, creating a protective cage of muscle and fur. They hit the frigid water together, and Marcus felt Thunder kick powerfully, steering them toward the bank. The current fought them, but Thunder had spent years fishing in these waters. He knew how to read the river, how to use its force rather than fight it. With one final surge of strength, Thunder angled them toward a fallen tree that reached out over the water. Marcus grabbed the branches, pulling himself up with shaking arms. When he turned to help Thunder, he saw something that stopped his heart. The bear's head was dipping below the surface, his strength finally failing after protecting Marcus. Without hesitation, Marcus plunged his arm into the freezing water, grabbing Thunder's fur. The cold hit him like thousands of needles, but he held on. Thunder's eyes met his, and in them, Marcus saw the same trust he'd witnessed countless times during their years together. It was the look Thunder had given him when Marcus first bandaged his injured paw as a cub, when they weathered thunderstorms together in the cabin, when Sarah would sing to them both on quiet evenings. That trust had never wavered, even after 25 years apart. Marcus's joints screamed in protest as he pulled with all his strength, but Thunder was too heavy. The bear's massive body was being dragged under by the current, and Marcus felt his own grip on the fallen tree starting to slip. Just then, an old memory flashed through his mind. Sarah teaching Thunder to climb onto their dock using a specific whistle pattern. It was a sound Marcus hadn't made in decades, but now, fighting against exhaustion and the numbing cold, he pursed his trembling lips and whistled. The effect was immediate. Thunder's eyes widened with recognition, and his powerful muscles tensed. The old bear kicked with renewed vigor, fighting against the current as Marcus whistled again and again, each note carrying years of shared memories. Together, they had created a language of their own, and somehow it had survived all these years in both their hearts. But as Thunder struggled to reach the bank, something unexpected happened. The wolves, which had been watching from the shoreline, began moving down the bank alongside them. Marcus's heart sank, thinking they were waiting to attack Thunder in his weakened state. Then he saw something astonishing. The largest wolf, a grayed veteran like Thunder himself, was pushing fallen branches into the water, creating a kind of makeshift path. Other wolves followed suit, extending the line of debris toward Thunder. Marcus watched in amazement as he realized what was happening. The wolves recognized Thunder. They were helping the bear who had likely been their neighbor, perhaps even their occasional ally, for over 2 decades. Thunder seemed to understand. He moved from branch to branch, gradually working his way closer to the shore. But just as hope began to rise in Marcus's chest, a massive section of ice slammed into their fallen tree. The impact shook Marcus loose, and he felt himself falling toward the deadly current. In that split second, he saw Thunder's eyes change, a fierce determination replacing exhaustion. The bear lunged forward with explosive power, catching Marcus's jacket in his teeth. As they both went under, Thunder twisted his body, using the force of the current to slingshot them toward the shore. It was a move Marcus had seen Thunder use countless times when fishing in their creek, now deployed with desperate precision to save both their lives. The world became a chaos of cold and darkness as they spun beneath the surface. Marcus felt Thunder's grip on his jacket remain firm, even as his own consciousness began to fade. Then suddenly, they burst through the surface together, and Marcus found himself being flung through the air. He landed hard in deep snow on the riverbank, the impact driving what little air remained from his lungs. Through blurred vision, he saw Thunder dragging himself from the water, his massive form shaking violently. The wolves scattered at his emergence, disappearing into the swirling snow. Marcus tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't respond. The cold had stolen all feeling from his body. His clothes were freezing solid, and he knew hypothermia was setting in rapidly. Thunder stumbled toward him, his own movements growing sluggish. The bear's fur was starting to ice over, creating a crackling sound with each step. They needed shelter immediately, or neither of them would survive the night. The Phillips cave was still 30 yards away, up a steep embankment. Marcus began crawling through the snow, but after only a few feet his arms gave out. He felt Thunder's teeth gently close on his jacket again, trying to drag him, but the bear's exhausted legs buckled. They collapsed together in the snow, Thunder's massive body curling around Marcus in a final attempt to share what warmth remained between them. As Marcus's consciousness began to drift, the snow around them suddenly took on an orange glow. A familiar sound cut through the wind, helicopter rotors. Marcus hadn't told anyone where he was going to check the trail cameras, but Sarah had always insisted he carry an emergency beacon in his jacket. In his panic about the bears and his shock at recognizing Thunder, he had forgotten about it completely. The impact of landing in the snow must have activated it. The helicopter's searchlight found them, and Marcus saw several figures rappelling down through the swirling snow. But Thunder, protecting Marcus to the last, rose to his full height with a warning growl, placing himself between Marcus and the approaching rescuers. Even in his weakened state, the bear was an intimidating sight, his ice-covered fur glinting in the searchlight. The rescue team hesitated, their tranquilizer guns raised. Marcus knew he had to act fast. In their eyes, Thunder was just another aggressive wild bear. With the last of his strength, Marcus pulled himself up using Thunder's fur, his frozen fingers barely able to grip. The bear immediately lowered his head to support Marcus's weight, just as he had done thousands of times when they lived together. The gesture wasn't lost on the rescue team. Wild bears don't help humans stand. Their weapons remained raised, but Marcus could see the confusion in their faces as the searchlight illuminated this impossible scene. "His name is Thunder," Marcus called out, his voice cracking from cold and emotion. "He's protecting me. He saved my life." The words seemed to hang in the frigid air as the rescue team exchanged glances. One of them stepped forward, removing her snow goggles, and Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He recognized her face. It was Jenny Phillips, old Jim Phillips's granddaughter. She had been just a little girl when Thunder lived with Marcus and Sarah, one of the children Sarah had taught about water safety with Thunder's help. "Mr. Stone?" Jenny's voice carried the weight of recognition. "Is that really Thunder?" She took another step forward, and to everyone's amazement, Thunder's aggressive posture softened. His head tilted slightly, in the same way it used to when he was trying to remember something. Jenny slowly reached into her rescue pack and pulled out something that made Marcus's throat tighten. A small jar of honey, the same brand Sarah used to give Thunder as a treat. The massive bear's reaction was immediate. His nose twitched, and a low, gentle rumble, that same purring sound from earlier, emanated from his chest. Jenny carefully opened the jar, the familiar scent cutting through the bitter cold. "I keep these in my pack," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "Grandpa always said they were good for hypothermia victims, but he also used to tell stories about a gentle bear that lived with the Stones, how it would eat honey straight from the jar like a person." Thunder took a small step toward Jenny, but suddenly his legs buckled. The combination of cold, exhaustion, and his desperate rescue efforts had finally overtaken him. As the bear collapsed, Marcus fell with him. The last thing Marcus saw before his own consciousness faded was Jenny rushing forward, calling for emergency blankets, her hand already reaching out to touch Thunder's ice-covered fur. In that moment, Marcus remembered Sarah's words about love finding its own way, about bonds that transcend time and nature. But there was something else she used to say, something about circles closing and stories finding their proper endings. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency blankets, medical equipment, and the rhythmic beating of helicopter blades. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time he opened his eyes, his first thought was of Thunder. The rescue team had needed to work quickly, setting up portable heaters around the massive bear while trying to gradually raise his core temperature. Jenny hadn't left Thunder's side, continuously checking his breathing and heart rate, using her wilderness veterinary training, another gift passed down from her grandfather, who had treated injured wildlife in these mountains for decades. Through the fog of his own medical treatment, Marcus heard fragments of radio conversations about bringing in a wildlife transport vehicle, about the logistics of moving a bear of Thunder's size. But it was the quiet moments between these bursts of activity that stirred the deepest memories. As feeling slowly returned to his extremities, bringing with it waves of pain, Marcus remembered the day Sarah had first brought home the orphaned Thunder. The tiny cub had been so weak that they had to feed him with an eyedropper every 2 hours. Sarah had stayed up for 3 straight nights, singing lullabies to keep herself awake while monitoring his breathing. "Mr. Stone?" Jenny's voice pulled him back to the present. She had moved closer to his stretcher, her face illuminated by the emergency lights they'd set up around the area. "Thunder's starting to respond to the warming treatment, but there's something you need to see." She helped Marcus sit up, supporting him as he turned to look at the bear. The rescue team had managed to clear much of the ice from Thunder's fur, revealing something that made Marcus's breath catch. A series of old scars across the bear's shoulder and flank, long healed but still visible beneath his fur. "Those marks," Jenny said softly, "they match a story my grandfather used to tell. About 5 years after Thunder was released, there was a terrible forest fire in the northern valley. Most of the wildlife fled south, but a mother bear and her cubs were trapped by the flames. The rangers found them later, alive but badly burned. They said another bear had led them through the fire, using his own body to shield them from falling debris. They treated the bear's burns, but the hero bear disappeared before they could help him." She paused, her eyes glistening. "Grandpa always said it had to be Thunder. He said only a bear who understood human kindness would risk his life to save others that way." Thunder stirred then, his massive head lifting slightly as his eyes found Marcus. The old bear made a sound, not his usual gentle rumble, but something Marcus hadn't heard in 25 years, the specific vocalization Thunder used to make when he was hurting and needed comfort. Without thinking, Marcus began humming the lullaby Sarah had sung during those first nights, the one that had helped a frightened cub trust in human kindness. Thunder's eyes remained fixed on Marcus, and gradually, his tense muscles began to relax. "We've got a problem," one of the rescue team members announced, checking his radio. "The transport vehicle can't make it up here in these conditions. The storm's getting worse and the access road is completely iced over." The team exchanged worried glances. They couldn't safely move Thunder without proper equipment, but leaving him exposed to the elements much longer wasn't an option either. The bear's life still hung in the balance, his body temperature not yet stabilized despite their best efforts. Marcus forced himself to focus through his own pain and exhaustion. The situation reminded him of another crisis, decades ago, when Thunder had fallen through thin spring ice on their creek. Sarah had known exactly what to do then, turning their barn into an emergency warming station with heat lamps and blankets. They had worked through the night to save the young bear, and Sarah had discovered Thunder's unusual response to music during those long hours. The memory sparked an idea. "Jenny," Marcus called, his voice stronger now. "Your grandfather's cave. It's less than 50 yards from here. It used to be a natural warm spot because of the geothermal activity underneath. That's why Jim used it for his supplies." He remembered the countless times he and Jim had discussed the unique properties of that cave system, how the deeper chambers maintained a steady temperature even in the harshest winters. "If we can get Thunder there, the natural heat might help stabilize his temperature." The rescue team quickly confirmed Marcus's recollection with their thermal imaging equipment. The cave entrance was partially blocked by snow and ice, but the readings showed significantly warmer temperatures inside. The challenge would be moving Thunder. The bear weighed well over 1,000 pounds, and though he was conscious, he was too weak to walk the distance himself. That's when they heard it. A familiar howl carried on the wind. The wolves had returned, but this time they weren't alone. Through the swirling snow, Marcus could make out more shapes moving through the darkness. The rescue team raised their weapons again, but Marcus gestured for them to wait. Emerging from the storm were the 3 bears that had originally threatened Marcus, but their behavior was completely different now. They moved with purpose but showed no aggression, and to everyone's amazement, they were working in concert with the wolf pack. Jenny's eyes widened as she studied the scene. "It's territory-marking behavior," she whispered. "But I've never seen anything like this. The bears and wolves, they're creating a perimeter. They're protecting Thunder." The animals had formed a rough circle around the rescue area, keeping other predators at bay while the humans worked to save one of their own. Marcus remembered how Sarah used to say that Thunder would become a bridge between their worlds, but he had never imagined anything like this. The largest of the 3 bears, the one Thunder had fought earlier, suddenly approached. Instead of aggression, it displayed a submissive posture, keeping its head low. The bear began clearing a path through the deep snow toward the cave, using its massive body to push aside the drifts. The other bears joined in, and even the wolves began digging at the smaller snowdrifts, creating a navigable trail. "They're making a path for us," Jenny breathed, her professional composure cracking with wonder. "They understand what we're trying to do." She quickly organized the team to take advantage of this unprecedented cooperation. They attached their rescue sleds together to create a larger transport surface, padding it with emergency blankets. The real challenge would be moving Thunder onto it. But Thunder, even in his weakened state, seemed to understand what was needed. Using what little strength he had left, he rolled himself onto the makeshift sled when they positioned it next to him. The movement clearly caused him pain, and he made that distinct sound of distress again. Without thinking, Marcus began humming Sarah's lullaby once more. To everyone's astonishment, the other bears and wolves grew quieter, as if responding to the music. "The frequency of your humming," one of the medical technicians noted, checking a device on his belt. "It's similar to the subsonic communications bears use with their cubs. You and your wife accidentally taught Thunder a way to communicate across species." The revelation hit Marcus hard. All these years he and Sarah had been doing more than just caring for a bear. They had been creating a new language of trust and cooperation that had survived for 25 years in these mountains. The team worked quickly to secure Thunder to the sled. The other bears and wolves maintained their protective circle, occasionally dealing with curious predators drawn by the commotion. As they began the careful process of moving Thunder toward the cave, Marcus noticed something remarkable about the three bears that had originally attacked him. Their ribs were less visible now than they had been earlier, and there were traces of fresh fish around their muzzles. Somehow, during the time Marcus had been unconscious, Thunder's wolf allies had helped provide food for the hungry bears. The journey to the cave entrance was painstakingly slow. The rescue team had rigged a pulley system using their climbing gear, with the three bears instinctively positioning themselves at crucial points to help guide the sled through deeper snowdrifts. Marcus insisted on walking alongside despite the medical team's objections, one hand always maintaining contact with Thunder's fur. The bear's breathing had become more labored, and Marcus could feel him trembling beneath his thick coat. Each time Thunder showed signs of distress, Marcus would hum Sarah's lullaby, and the massive bear would calm slightly, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. Jenny led the way, her grandfather's old maps of the cave system proving invaluable. "There's a chamber about 30 feet in," she explained, consulting the weathered papers by headlamp light. "Grandpa used to call it the warm room. It's where he kept his medical supplies for treating injured wildlife." She paused, her voice softening. "He treated Thunder here once, about 15 years ago. A younger bear had challenged him for territory, and Thunder was pretty badly hurt. Grandpa said Thunder remembered him, let him clean the wounds without tranquilizers. He always said it was proof that Thunder had never forgotten his time with humans." As they approached the cave entrance, the wolves suddenly became agitated. Two of them darted inside, then returned moments later with their fur standing on end. Jenny quickly directed her headlamp into the darkness, revealing the source of their concern. A mother mountain lion and two cubs had taken shelter in the outer chamber. The rescue team tensed, but before anyone could react, the three bears that had been helping them moved forward. Instead of aggression, they exhibited a remarkable behavior. They began making low, rhythmic sounds, almost like Thunder's gentle rumble, but different. The mountain lion responded with similar vocalizations. "They're negotiating," the wildlife technician whispered, recording the interaction on his equipment. "This is unprecedented. The bears are communicating with the mountain lion using vocalizations they learned from Thunder, who learned them from humans." They watched in amazement as the mother mountain lion gathered her cubs and moved deeper into the cave system, choosing a side tunnel and leaving the main chamber free. The warm room was exactly as Jenny's grandfather had described it. The temperature was noticeably higher, and the walls seemed to radiate a gentle heat. Old shelving units still lined the walls, stocked with dusty but preserved medical supplies. A large flat area had been cleared long ago, presumably for treating larger animals, and this is where they carefully maneuvered Thunder's sled. The three bears followed them in but maintained a respectful distance, standing guard near the entrance while the wolves patrolled outside. As they worked to stabilize Thunder in the warmer environment, Marcus noticed something scratched into the cave wall. Dates and names, dozens of them, recorded in Jim Phillips's distinctive handwriting. Each entry documented an animal he had treated, and Marcus's heart caught when he found the entry from 15 years ago. Thunder, male grizzly, territorial dispute, showed recognition and trust. Sarah Stone was right about him. The revelation hit Marcus hard. All these years he had thought Thunder had been completely alone in the wilderness, but the bear had maintained connections not just with the wildlife, but with humans too. Jim Phillips had been watching over him, documenting his life, understanding that Thunder was special. Sarah had known somehow, had sensed that their bear would never be truly wild, but would instead become something entirely new, a creature who could bridge the gap between worlds. Thunder's condition was finally beginning to stabilize in the cave's natural warmth, but the medical team was concerned about the strain on his heart. At his age, the combination of the fight, the cold water, and the rescue effort had pushed him to his absolute limits. As they monitored his vital signs, the 3 bears that had helped them suddenly became alert. New sounds were echoing through the cave system. More bears were approaching. The rescue team quickly positioned themselves between Thunder and the cave entrance, but Jenny raised her hand for them to wait. The approaching sounds were different from normal bear movements. There was a rhythm to them, almost like the coordinated movements they had witnessed earlier. The 3 bears that had helped with the rescue remained calm, and the wolves outside hadn't raised any alarm. Through the dim light of the cave entrance, shapes began to emerge from the swirling snow. What they saw left everyone speechless. A procession of bears was making its way toward the cave, moving in an organized line that defied everything known about grizzly behavior. Leading them was an enormous female grizzly with distinctive silver-tipped fur, and Marcus noticed something remarkable about her movement. She had the same slight limp that Sarah had documented in her journal 20 years ago, when Thunder had defended a female bear with an injured leg from poachers. Behind her came others, each bearing signs that Marcus recognized from Jim Phillips's cave wall records. The male with the notched ear, the younger female with unusual golden fur, the old boar with the scarred muzzle. These weren't just any bears, they were all animals that Thunder had helped or defended over the years. The wildlife technician was frantically documenting everything with his equipment. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Bears don't form social groups like this. They don't..." He trailed off as the silver-tipped female approached Thunder. She made the same gentle rumbling sound that Thunder used, and to everyone's amazement, she began gently nudging the scattered medical supplies on the old shelves with her nose. She was showing them she remembered how Jim Phillips had treated injuries in this very cave. Jenny's eyes filled with tears as she checked her grandfather's journals. "Look at this entry," she said, showing Marcus a weathered page. 10 years ago, silver-tip female returned with injured cub. Thunder led them here, beginning to suspect he's teaching others about human aid. Grandpa wasn't just treating injured wildlife, he was documenting the evolution of an entirely new behavior pattern, started by Thunder and passed on to others. The revelation was staggering. Thunder hadn't just survived in the wild, he had created a network of trust and cooperation that had gradually spread through the entire ecosystem. The bears he helped had learned from him, and they in turn had influenced others. Even the wolves and mountain lions had adapted to this new way of coexisting. Sarah's vision of Thunder becoming a bridge between worlds had manifested in ways far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The silver-tipped female was now carefully examining Thunder, displaying a gentleness that seemed impossible for a creature her size. She turned to the cave entrance and made a series of low calls. Within minutes, more bears appeared, carrying things in their mouths, fresh pine boughs for bedding, still flopping fish, and even small branches of winter berries. The wolves joined in, dragging rabbits they had caught. They were bringing food and materials, just as they might for an injured member of their own family. Marcus watched in wonder as the cave transformed into something that seemed to blur the line between wild and domestic. The bears worked with surprising coordination, arranging the pine boughs around Thunder to help insulate him from the cold stone floor. The rescue team adapted their medical treatment to work around the animals, recognizing that this extraordinary show of cooperation might be Thunder's best chance for survival. Jenny documented everything, knowing that this behavior would revolutionize our understanding of wildlife intelligence and social structures. As the night deepened, more animals arrived, not just bears and wolves, but foxes, elk, and even a few bold ravens. Each species maintained its distance from the others, but all seemed to understand that normal territorial rules had been suspended. They were united by their connection to Thunder, who had spent 25 years teaching them that cooperation was possible, that trust could extend beyond the boundaries of species. Thunder's vital signs were slowly improving, but he was still dangerously weak. The old bear's eyes would occasionally flutter open, taking in the extraordinary gathering around him. Each time he showed signs of distress, not just Marcus but several of the bears would make that gentle rumbling sound. They had learned his language of comfort and were using it to help him heal. The silver-tipped female remained closest to him, and Marcus noticed something peculiar about her behavior. She kept looking between Thunder and the cave wall where Jim's records were written, then to the entrance where Sarah had once stood while helping Jim treat injured wildlife. It was almost as if she was remembering those times herself. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to ease. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the cave entrance, casting long shadows across the extraordinary gathering of wildlife. Thunder's condition had stabilized through the night, thanks to the combined efforts of the rescue team and his wild family. The silver-tipped female hadn't left his side, and Marcus noticed she had been mimicking the rescue team's monitoring behaviors, regularly checking Thunder's breathing and alertness, just as she might do with an injured cub. Jenny had spent hours documenting everything in her grandfather's journal, adding her observations to decades of records. "We've been thinking about wildlife rehabilitation all wrong," she explained to Marcus as they watched the animals interact. "We've been trying to choose between making animals wild or tame, but Thunder showed us there's another way. He created a middle path, teaching both humans and animals that trust and cooperation can exist without losing their essential nature." The wildlife technician's readings had revealed something extraordinary during the night. The vocalizations used by the different species had evolved into a complex system of communication, with Thunder's learned sounds at its core. The bears were using variations of the comfort rumble Thunder had learned from Sarah. The wolves had adapted their howls to match these frequencies, and even the mountain lions had incorporated elements of this shared language. It was the first documented case of multiple species deliberately adapting their communication to work together. As morning light filled the cave, Thunder's eyes opened fully for the first time since his rescue. The old bear's gaze swept across the gathered animals, then fixed on Marcus. With tremendous effort, Thunder lifted his massive head and made a sound that Marcus hadn't heard in 25 years, the specific vocalization he used to make when asking to be read to. Sarah used to joke that Thunder was the only bear in history who enjoyed bedtime stories. Fighting back tears, Marcus settled beside his old friend and began to tell their story. He spoke of finding Thunder as a cub, of Sarah's gentle guidance, of the difficult decision to let him go, and of all the lives Thunder had touched since then. As he spoke, the other animals gathered closer, their attention focused on his voice. The silver-tipped female made the soft rumbling sound, and one by one, other bears joined in, creating a harmony of gentle vocalizations that filled the cave. The rescue team watched in amazement as Thunder, drawing strength from the presence of his human and wild families, gradually sat up. His movements were still weak, but his eyes were clear and alert. The wildlife technician's readings showed his vital signs continuing to improve, defying their earlier concerns about his heart. The love and support of his gathered family, both human and wild, had helped him find the strength to recover. Jenny made a discovery that morning that brought everything full circle. Behind some fallen rocks, she found her grandfather's last journal entry, written just months before his passing. "Thunder has achieved something remarkable here. He hasn't just survived in the wild, he's created a new kind of wilderness, one where cooperation replaces conflict, where trust builds bridges between species. Sarah Stone once told me that love finds its own way. Looking at what Thunder has built here, I finally understand what she meant." As the morning progressed, plans were made to monitor Thunder's recovery. Jenny would coordinate with wildlife services to establish the cave as a protected study site, recognizing its importance in understanding interspecies cooperation. The other animals gradually began to disperse, returning to their territories, but Marcus knew they would return. Thunder had created something permanent here, a community that would outlast him. Marcus stayed in the cave with Thunder through his recovery, sleeping beside him, just as he had 25 years ago. The silver-tipped female remained as well, and Marcus realized she was Thunder's mate, the one he had saved from poachers all those years ago. Together, they had raised cubs who carried forward Thunder's unique legacy, teaching each generation that trust and kindness could bridge any divide. Sarah's final words about love finding its own way had proven prophetic in ways no one could have imagined. Thunder hadn't just remembered his human family. He had taken the lessons of love and trust he learned from them and used them to transform an entire ecosystem. He had become more than just a bridge between wild and tame. He had created a new way of being, where the boundaries between species dissolved in the face of compassion and cooperation. As Thunder drifted off to sleep that morning, surrounded by the love of both his human and wild families, Marcus understood that their story wasn't ending. It was transforming, just as Thunder had transformed the wilderness. The bear's legacy would live on in the complex web of relationships he had built, in the new languages he had helped create, and in the hearts of all those who had learned from him that love truly does find its own way, even across the widest of divides.